I want smart people doing cool shit. My entrepreneurial journey didn't start until my late 20s. And it was an unspoken or maybe a spoken thing in Hawaii. If you wanted to do something different or have opportunity, you needed to leave. And so for me, I left after college very frustrated in that feeling like I couldn't be at home. And it was this idea of you had to go away, be successful, and maybe crossing fingers someday you could move home. And so I left. I moved to San Francisco and started my journey there. Kind of through that whole process, I've had a lot of ups and downs. I've had success, I've had failure. And through all of that, I'm a true believer that having an entrepreneurial mindset is key to life success. And there are 4 keys to that. 1 is having a learning mentality. 2 is an ownership mentality. 3 is building networks, and 4 is being agile and taking risks. I'm going to share a little bit of my story with you all today, and also kind of how I came to learn these 4 things that I believe are truly keys to life success, having that entrepreneurial mindset. So, graduated from college, I was in the Bay Area, kind of doing the adulting thing. And I wasn't quite sure what that was, and it wasn't really jiving with me, but I just felt like, okay, I'm supposed to be doing like this job. So ultimately, I had a quarter life crisis. I was the ripe age of 26 years old, and I started seeing a coach. And so started working with her. And for the first time in my life, I took this pause, and she asked me, what do you really want to do? And it was the first time I had really thought about not just kind of being reactive and taking opportunities that just came towards me, but actually really thinking about what did I want to do. And I think a lot of people in life kind of wait for other people to tell them what to do, and they feel very disconnected. And that's really how I felt, was that I was just kind of living this thing that wasn't truly mine. So we went through this process, and she said, okay, let's just throw up on a wall anything that you have ever been interested in. Doesn't matter what it's connected to whatsoever. Let's just get it up on the wall. I said, okay, I've always wanted to do city planning. I liked my wines classes in college. Technology is really interesting. I'm in Silicon Valley. Maybe I want to work for myself. So all these things I was putting up on the wall. And she said, all right, as you are looking to get meetings, if they're related to something on this wall, then pursue them. If they aren't, then don't. And that was very empowering for me because a lot of times people say, oh, what are you interested in doing? You say, I don't know, anything. That's really overwhelming. And so what this did was start to help me think about my learning mentality. And I know I mentioned that earlier is, how do I use every experience as a learning lesson? How do I think about what I like doing, what I don't like doing, what I'm good at, what I'm not good at, and utilizing that as a learning to make better decisions for how I want to move forward. So through that whole process, I ended up starting my first company in 2007. It was solving a huge problem in the world and a huge problem for me, which was finding good wine at cheap prices. And so that's what my first company was, near Vino. It was the first mobile website for wine. It was when we still had those super clunky phones, not quite iPhone yet. And we quickly launched into an app once the iPhone was created and the App Store was created. So we became the #1 wine app on the iTunes Store and a top 100 overall paid app. And so that was a crazy ride. And really, ultimately, it was for 5 years. I had a great experience. And then I had a difference of opinion with my co-founder, and we decided to separate ways. And for a long time, I really thought of that as a big failure. But really, I now see it as kind of that learning mentality where how have I used what I learned there moving forward? And how do I start to have a better relationship with my gut? How do I pay attention? And really start to define what success means to me. And so moving forward from that I've really learned a ton around my relationship with co-founder and how do I feel inside my emotions, not just my intellect, and how do I utilize that and continue to learn as that. And so what I want to ask all of you with a learning mentality is, what's one thing you can do to grow? So moving forward from there, I started a couple other companies in the Bay Area. And then I started really thinking about why can't what I learned in San Francisco, why can't I do that in Hawaii? I was so frustrated, graduating from college where that was, to me, it felt like that wasn't an option that I could move home. I started thinking, okay, what is the innovation ecosystem? What are startups, entrepreneurship? What have I been doing these past 5 years, starting these companies? And how can I take what I've learned in the Bay Area and bring that back home to Hawaii to start to seed ideas and create opportunity that I didn't feel like I had myself? And so I kept coming back home, checking things out. Box Jelly had just opened our first co-working space. This was in 2011. And then we had our first startup weekend, and it just felt like there were some hints that this was really could be happening here. And so I decided to move home and help contribute to an innovation ecosystem. I didn't know what that was going to look like for me, but I felt like I had learned enough that I wanted to come back and give back. So I moved back home, quickly started working with the first accelerators that got started here in the islands. And that was really exciting. For those who don't know what an accelerator is, it's a program, kind of an intensive, where startups come in, they get access to resources, mentorship, and capital to help them scale and fuel their startups in a very specific amount of time. So that was really inspiring to me to be on the other side of the table. As a mentor, we were investing in the companies and thinking about how I've learned all of these things as an entrepreneur myself and how I could be giving back to entrepreneurs that were here in Hawaii. And so, for me, that notion of moving home really tapped into that ownership mentality, and looking at being comfortable and confident in the decisions I was making and taking accountability for my actions. The buck really stops with you. And so when I decided to move home, I decided to take my life and take it into where I wanted to be. That really was that ownership mentality, which I think is truly part of having an entrepreneurial mindset. Now, moving forward, now having worked with many entrepreneurs, I started thinking, okay, well, what else? Like, how can we broaden how we view innovation here in Hawaii? What kinds of companies make sense to not only start here, but to stay here and thrive here? And what is a competitive advantage or a regional strength of Hawaii that we could really double down on? And so that was really where the thesis and where Mana Up, the company that I have today with my co-founder, Brittany Hyde, is how do we scale product companies here in the islands that are elevating the brand of Hawaii? So we've seen many examples of that. Hawaiian Host, Honolulu Cookie Company, many companies have been successful, but how do we help fuel more companies that are headquartered here that can help create jobs, sustainable livelihood, and opportunity by scaling these product businesses, CPG, consumer packaged goods, to global markets? So we launched Mana Up in 2017, and we now have 63 companies that have come through the program. In 2020 alone, these companies represented $43 million in revenue to the state of Hawaii. And so as we look at that, we think about, when we started was, how do we help fuel 100 product-based businesses earning $10 million or more in annual revenue? What could $1 billion look like for the state of Hawaii? And what would that look like from a jobs and opportunity standpoint? And so it's been an incredible ride, and really I wouldn't have been able to get started building Mana Up as quickly as we did without that network building that I had basically been doing since I would say born. A lot of which was leveraging my network in the Bay Area, a lot of which was leveraging my network that I had built moving home and even before moving home. And so I know for a fact that Mana Up wouldn't have gotten stood up maybe at all or as quickly without that. And a piece of that is really around challenging yourself to expand your network beyond your normal circles. And how do you think about creating networks that can really, be a two-way street? So it's around being in service to others and how can they be in service to you? And then also looking at establishing them now and being able to draw on them in the future. And so that, I think, is a really key piece to this. And I know for me, that's something I do. So one thing I want to ask all of you is, are there relationships that you could be establishing or stewarding better? So now we have Mana Up and we are growing. These companies are, incredible. We had 10 million tourists coming here a year, and then the pandemic hit. And so that really was affecting many of our product companies because a lot of them were in tourist areas, heavily impacted when, of course, the world shut down. And so for us, not only with our program, we had to be agile and take risks, and especially during the pandemic, and this is the fourth key to an entrepreneurial mindset, is, looking at, now that people weren't coming here, we have our store, House of Mana up in the heart of Waikiki. We shifted heavily to online, digital marketing, direct to consumer, e-commerce. Looking at now, we still have our phones, right? Everyone at their fingertips can be purchasing, but also can be looking at the stories of the entrepreneurs, the stories of the companies. What are the ingredients? Flipping over the package. Who made this? What do they stand for? All of those are key assets that we have, these amazing stories from Hawaii. People are looking for authenticity and transparency. And so we totally switched everything around to go all online. Even our end of our accelerator showcase, we normally hosted a party at DFS, T Galleria, as 1,000 people. We had a marketplace, we had pitches, and it was really for the community to come together to support these entrepreneurs. And of course, that was not going to happen. So we decided, and we knew it wasn't going to be perfect, but we wanted to think about how we could be taking risks and trying new ways to accomplish what we needed to. And how do we trust ourselves, which is all part of being agile and taking a risk. So we decided to host our showcase online. It was bringing Hawaii to the world. And we ended up having 180,000 people watch the show. We did 80,000 in sales in 3 days. And it was incredible to see how much we could continue to support the companies, but also be double downing on this idea of bringing Hawaii to the world, that people don't have to come here to experience Hawaii, and that we can continue to bring in new dollars into our state to continue to drive economic impact. So one question I have for you is, what's one risk that you need to take that you've been holding back on? Now, that's my story, and I'm feel incredibly fulfilled, not only having first started being very frustrated that I couldn't be here, and having my experiences in the mainland, and being able to come back here, and being able to plant seeds for others and helping other entrepreneurs make their dreams and opportunities here in the islands. That is a shared vision. That is something that's bigger than all of us. And of course, that vision is ultimately smart people doing cool shit.